Are you always tired and you just don't know why, and everything you've tried doesn't work? Perhaps you have tried some kind of medical intervention or treatment protocol, and yet you still crashed again, even after maybe feeling a bit better for a while. I know this story really well. I was diagnosed with Adrenal Fatigue Syndrome in 2012 after many years of feeling subpar, and I started to feel a lot better, and then I crashed again, and then I did that 4 times before I finally took my health into my own hands and decided to do it differently, decided to look at this from a different perspective. I am a holistic psychologist and a body talk practitioner, and I specialize in the treatment of chronic fatigue. I support overwhelmed and chronically exhausted women to overcome their fatigue and to embrace the fullest versions of themselves that they know is possible without burning out. This is what I managed to do for myself, and as a result, I developed a big passion for working with others, and I have created a business around it now. It has become my focus in my practice, and that's what I want to share with you today. So I'm talking about chronic fatigue as adrenal fatigue syndrome, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue caused by hormonal imbalance. So any kind of fatigue that is just chronic, where you feel tired all the time. And of course, there may be other symptoms like joint pain, like insomnia, blood sugar issues, detoxing issues, gut problems. And that is very often the case with chronic fatigue. The problem is if you go to a conventional doctor, your conventional doctor is going to address just one of the many symptoms that you show up with. And they're going to try and give you a quick fix, something to just fix that one symptom, or maybe 1 or 2. Most conventional doctors are not trained to see the body as a system, and in fact are not trained to see the body and the mind and the connection between them. Or perhaps they do know there's a connection and they tell you it's stress, and then they recommend antidepressants. And yes, they're addressing one part of the story, but they're missing out on so much more. You cannot understand chronic fatigue if it is not addressed by looking at the entire body, mind, spirit picture. So we need to look at what's happening physiologically, environmental pressures and toxins. We need to look at emotional stresses and psychological stresses, and energetically what's happening in the body. And your spiritual story, your spiritual experience of life is also very much a part of this. So what happened with me was I realized that I had been feeling for the large majority of my life that the world was unsafe. And I don't necessarily mean like crime. I mean that I just felt like I wasn't okay. I just couldn't trust that I was going to be okay. And I also had an underlying sense of not being good enough. And I realized that those fears and those beliefs drove so much of my behavior and my experience to life. And that my experience of life and my behavior was what was making me chronically exhausted. And then what I noticed was that with a lot of my clients who were showing up with overwhelm and chronic fatigue, they had very similar experiences. In fact, we all had very similar personalities. So I actually named it, I called it the holding personality. And what I noticed is that all of us tended to be perfectionists. We wanted to achieve and strive in all we did. Please also note that the flip side of this is people who procrastinate. Oftentimes procrastination comes from a fear of failure. So actually what underlies procrastination is perfectionism. Also, a need to plan, to organize, to always want to know the answer and have an answer, the need to rescue and fix, and generally being very busy, being a doer. And look, there's absolutely nothing wrong with those qualities, and they are highly valued in our patriarchal society. But unfortunately, when they're done to excess, and when they're done unconsciously because of underlying fears and a need to feel safe and good enough, they can lead to depletion and exhaustion. And then what I noticed was that many of the clients that I was seeing with this particular kind of holding personality also had similar backgrounds. And that makes sense because our personality is very much shaped by the circumstances in which we grew up. And so what I noticed was that for many people, there'd been unpredictability in some cases of moving, for instance, many moves, many changes, and inconsistency, so lack of consistency. And or there had been trauma, major trauma like deaths, or even smaller minor traumas. And let's just say here that inconsistency and unpredictability can be perceived as trauma by children, because trauma is related very much to one's sense of perceived control. So if there's a sense of things being out of control, oftentimes the situation will be experienced as traumatic. So to the degree that a child felt that things were in their control and that life was generally secure, it would have created a sense of being safe and built a healthier perception of life. A massive part of this was the degree to which parents were able to meet them emotionally. Now, sadly, most of our parents grew up in times when emotions were seen as weak, or at least were considered to be quite scary, and they didn't know what to do with them. Mostly because their parents had been the same and hadn't really guided them or supported them as to how to be with emotions. So they all got swept under the carpet. So what happened then is that when we as children have emotions and our parents are not able to tolerate them, they may do a number of things. They may try and keep us quiet, tell us to keep quiet. They might try to distract us. They might give you food. This will make you better. Here, have a sweet. They could have emotionally disconnected. So even while they were there presently, it was almost like they tacitly, it's like you can't feel it, but a door gets closed. And this one's really, it's very hard to understand as an adult, but children are so susceptible and are so tuned in that they can feel it. It feels like an absence. They can see the person, but they can feel that they're not with them. They're not present, fully present and emotional, because they're disconnected from their emotions, so they don't have to feel what's being triggered in them by their child's emotions. So there's disconnection, there's suppression, there might even be criticism and threatening of the child for having emotions. And what this does is it leaves the child feeling this very big and powerful emotion, fear, anger, sadness, and not knowing what to do with it, and feeling very out of control, and then seeing that it makes other people respond in a way that brings up in them a feeling of being unsafe. So the child feels even more unsafe when the parent responds in a negative way to this emotion that feels so very scary within them. So the child quickly learns that to be accepted and to be loved, to be good enough, to feel safe, that they need to suppress the emotions, and they need to do whatever they need to do to feel, to not have to feel, and to also perceive a sense of being in control. So they may often model their parents and disconnect emotionally, go into the head and stay and disconnect from the body. They may get very, very busy and need to achieve and succeed because this helps them to feel capable and in charge and on top of things. They may fix and rescue. So they may they may see that their parents are not coping, but because they need their parents to be okay so they can be okay, they try and take on everything for their parents. So they become very empathic, and they try and rescue and fix where actually they just don't have the capacity to do that, which is a vicious cycle, because then they feel even more out of control and more like a failure. And of course, all of this is happening on an unconscious level. And then the child grows up into an adult that has this holding personality, where in order to feel safe, they continue to strive, to push, to control and organize, to plan, to try and be on top of everything, to rescue, to fix, and to be emotionally disconnected. And this leads to fatigue in so many ways. Now, when you go and see your conventional medical doctor, he's only, or she, has only looked at one aspect of it. You may then go to a functional medical doctor, or a holistic or an integrative doctor, or a naturopath, who is going to look at the whole body-mind system and see that there's an imbalance physically. And oftentimes they're good results from treating the whole physical picture, the gut, the liver, the hormones, and perhaps giving adaptogens and addressing deficiencies like iron deficiency or vitamin B deficiency. And they may even talk to you about stress and talk to you about your lifestyle. But for the most part, even your functional medical doctors, your integrative doctors, are not going to address why the physical imbalance happened in the first place. And that comes down to this psychological stress that is created by this holding personality. So underlying all of this is also a low-grade stress activation. So as a child, the child did not feel supported and held. And so that stress was there, the fear. And the only way that they could manage it was to become self-reliant and to put things in place to feel in control. But yet the stress activation would have still been there. And what I mean by that is going into fight, flight, freeze. And what often happens is this creates a general imbalance in the whole stress or the nervous system. And this can predispose a person to being more sensitive to stress and having less stress tolerance as they get older. And it also, what it does is from a very young age, if there's chronic low-grade stress that's happening, when we are stressed, our bodies naturally change. There's some physical processes that happen to help us to go into fight flight. But when that happens chronically, it creates imbalance, physical imbalance. And so if a child from a young age has a low-grade stress response that's always quite easily activated and chronically activated, it's going to, over the long term, create further and further physical depletion. And oftentimes one major stressor then crashes, that causes a crash. And for many people, this is the birth of their first child and they're not getting enough sleep. It can be losing a job. It can be the death of a loved one. It can be any major stressor that some people may manage okay. It's going to be difficult, but they'll manage it. But whereas other people who have had chronic stress, even in a low-grade way, like I've mentioned, they're more susceptible to not coping with the stress. And they haven't been given the tools to know how to cope with it because their parents didn't know, and their parents tried to avoid it themselves because it was too triggering and difficult. So as an adult then, with this kind of chronic stress response and all of this holding going on, depletion happens in a number of ways. Not just because of the nervous system being chronically activated with very little time to go down to baseline into rest and digest, but also because the way we perceive our environment not only activates the stress response, the nervous system, even our mitochondria respond to how we perceive our environment and how we perceive life. Our mitochondria are the little powerhouses in our cells, and they produce energy. And new research shows that when we perceive our environment as threatening, and when I say perceive, I mean even if you wake up and think about all you have to do for that day, and maybe there's a meeting that's really quite a big one, and it creates worry, that already triggers a stress response. It's just a small stress response. But if you're doing that chronically throughout the day, it all adds up. And to the degree that you perceive a stressor in your environment, your mitochondria go into cell danger response. And when they're in cell danger response, they cannot be producing energy. They either can produce energy or they're in cell danger response. And the problem is when we are chronically activated in a stress response, even a low-grade stress response, it's going to impair the ability of the mitochondria to produce energy and for cellular health and rejuvenation and vitality. So stress plays a massive, massive role in your physical health and can create depletion. Furthermore, all of our coping mechanisms to help us try not to be too stressed or not to feel too threatened also lead to fatigue. So just the doing, the busyness, the striving, the achieving, and the constant doing without resting, without taking a proper lunch break, without filling in all your spare moments with trying to do something on your to-do list, all of that leads to cumulative stress, physical stress, emotional, emotional and mental. So the actual coping mechanisms of the holding personality, the holding of the holding personality, further create depletion. Then there's the embodiments of that. So what tends to happen is our bodies literally take on. So again, our perception of our environment actually creates physical changes in our body. And this includes your musculoskeletal body. It includes how you hold your body. So a person who's often feeling overwhelmed and not very safe will have a lot of defense posturing. Their shoulders are often a bit more raised. There's protection of the heart. There's a holding in the jaw. There's a general lifting up and forwards in the body versus a settling back and down, which is more of a relaxed pose. And so what often happens with people who are chronically stressed is they actually embody the stress in their physical structure, in their musculoskeletal body. And this then creates physical tension, which blocks the effective flow of circulation, nerve supply, and energy meridians within the body. As my osteopath says, form dictates function. So if your form is not ideally aligned, it's going to impact on your organs, your endocrines, your nerves, and your energy meridians in your body. And that's going to impact on your energy levels and create depletion. Then, if we, the other thing about feeling unsafe and feeling easily overwhelmed and going into holding state is that we also become very self-reliant and we don't allow ourselves to receive support. We don't allow ourselves to say yes, very often to surrendering and just letting someone else do it. And this then means that we easily become tired. Also, when we go into this holding state, we actually disconnect from our truth. So our truth, when we're born, we're divinely connected to source, to our truth, to being this beautiful, creative, loving, trusting being that trusts that the world is a great place and that everything is going to be all right. And then all of us, to varying degrees, start to put certain things in place to start wearing a mask, not an actual mask, but we start unconsciously wearing certain masks, taking on certain roles to feel more safe and to feel loved. And ideally, we don't want to do that too much. And as we get older, we become conscious of those and we come back into our truth more. this is oftentimes when people might feel like they're falling apart a bit because their masks and their roles start to drop away. This is often when people have a health crisis, is when that all starts to break. When all those masks and those roles and all of the things that we've done to feel safe start to not really work very well anymore. And we start to also realize that they're not actually who we are in the world. And then who on earth are we? So that is our truth underneath it. And to the degree that we try and keep holding on to all of this that we think we are, the adapted self, and resist allowing our truth to come through us, to speak our truth, to say how we feel, all those things that as a child might have resulted in rejection or resulted in our parents disconnecting emotionally. To the degree that we resist that happening, we're using energy. So we use a lot of energy not to prevent our truth from coming through and to maintain this adapted self. And of course, when we disconnected from source, we disconnected from life. We disconnected, our truth is also, so this is the spiritual aspect of it. We have this guiding force within us that is constantly guiding us to become the greatest and highest versions of ourselves. And when we're aligned with that, we're receiving life force and vitality and energy. And to the degree that we disconnect from that, we block ourselves off from receiving all of that. So you can see there's many ways in which this holding personality keeps us stuck and prevents us from receiving energy, and also depletes us and keeps us stuck in fatigue. So where does this leave you? Well, firstly, it can help to go and seek the support of a medical practitioner. I would avoid going to see a conventional doctor. You're probably not going to get the right kind of support. Try, if you can, to see a functional medical doctor, an integrative holistic doctor who understands chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue syndrome, etc., or a naturopath. But that's not where you should stop. Please don't stop there, because that's just going to address mainly the physical imbalance. It's very important that you address what's underneath it. And that is this tendency to experience life as unsafe, and the need to put things in place to feel safe and to feel good enough. So to do that, it requires consciousness and awareness. And I know this is scary, but unfortunately, I think that's often why we get sick. Is we get sick because our body starts talking to us in small ways to say, listen, the way you're doing it, it's not so great for you. You need to shift things around here, and we don't listen. So our body talks a little bit more, and we get a few more symptoms, and we still don't listen. So then the body just starts shouting, and it's like, well, if you're not going to listen to me, then this is what's going to happen. So it's your body's trying to get your attention to let you know that the way you've been experiencing and doing life, it's not serving you. And unfortunately, either you can keep trying to do it the old way and stay exhausted, or you can open yourself up to exploring what a different way would be. And I can promise you that as hard as it is at the beginning, the value of doing that is just indescribable. I can just say from our own life and from the shifts I've seen in my clients. So seek the support of a counselor, a therapist, someone who can help you to understand what your relationship with life is, and what your sense of self is, really. Start to explore if maybe the way you've always believed you are is not necessarily who you really are. And if you're actually living your truth, or if you're doing all the things that you thought you needed to do to be approved of, to be loved, to feel safe, and to feel good enough. So that's always a useful exploration to do with someone, to receive their support. So please also be open to receiving support. That is a big part of all of this too. Find someone who can help you to overcome early traumas, because we hold our traumas in our body. They block our energy. It creates that armoring that I spoke about, and it really, really adds to fatigue. And we stay in our minds so that we don't have to feel that trauma in our bodies. And to the degree you're disconnected from the body, you're going to continue to be exhausted. All right. because you're also not connected to what your body needs. You can't hear what your body's telling you need if you stay in your mind. So find ways to connect back to your body. Dance, massage, anything that can help you to start tuning back into your body. There's many meditations to help you to just start tuning in and do a body scan and feel what your body feels like. Start realizing just how disconnected you are from your body, and start to become aware of, firstly, you may notice in how you do it. Notice when you're doing that holding, when the holding personality is in place, notice what you're doing. Notice the pushing, the striving. There's almost like a sense of urgency and a wiredness that goes with it at times. Almost like you can't stop, even though you can see maybe you're being a little bit over the top. The need to constantly plan and organize. And when you find yourself taking on everyone else's feelings and emotions and needing to fix things for everyone else, look at that and just notice it. Just start noticing that you're doing that. That consciousness alone is going to take you a long way, because it helps you then to remove yourself from it and to start to do it differently. When you are in that place, if you can, notice what you feel in your body. Notice where you're feeling the holding, because there's going to be constriction and contraction in your body when you're in that place. Because what's actually happened is that your inner child, that inner child part of you that never felt supported and didn't know what to do with all those emotions, that part of you has been triggered. And that is why, as an adult, you've gone into this doing, striving, pushing, being in control, and holding yourself up to high expectations, holding it all together, holding all your emotions in. It's because that your inner child is being activated on some level, and you're afraid to feel what that feels like. So just feel what it feels like physically, because that's a safer place to start. And you may notice the holding in your shoulders, the band around your back, that's for me, it felt like a vice around my back. The jaw. Notice the pushing and the holding in your body. Just the consciousness of noticing when you're pushing, striving, doing, and so busy, when you're in overwhelm, and just the consciousness of feeling what that feels like physically is already a massive step. Then what will really help is to find ways to then self-regulate when you're in those places. So when you were younger and you were feeling like that, no one could say to you, it's okay. I know it feels hard, but we're going to get through this. Let's take a few deep breaths together. Okay, so no one did that with you, which means you never learned that, one, it's okay to have emotions, and two, that you're going to get through them all right. So now as an adult, you have the opportunity to reparent that inner child within you, and you can use things like the breath. So every time you breathe in deeply and slowly, you're actually activating something in the brain that tells the brain that you're safe, because we can only breathe deeply and slowly when we are in rest digest. So you're triggering the rest digest by breathing deeply and slowly. And it's also related to the vagus nerve and the nervous system response. So you can actually use your body to calm your mind and to calm your nervous system. So just doing that with your breath can help. And that means breathing right down into the base of your spine and filling your abdomen like a balloon, and then focus on the out breath more than the in breath. So focusing on releasing fully before breathing back in again. You can also do the 4-7-8 breath, which is to breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. This is a very powerful exercise as well. You can do 4 as 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 4 as 1, 2, 3, 4. But make sure you keep that rhythm for the 7 and the 8 as well, so that it's all in the same ratio. So breathing can help. Grounding. Stand on the earth. Stand in the sand, the soil, the grass with bare feet. And you can also do this on concrete inside as well. And imagine that the earth, that you're surrendering yourself and your worries and your stress deep into the earth. What's actually happening is that the earth has negative ions, and we need to be balanced with positive and negative, but we tend to be to hold too many positive ions in our body, which is related to inflammation and stress. So when you ground yourself, you are attracting the negative ions into your body to balance the accumulation of positive ions in the body. It's been scientifically proven to support chronic inflammation, which is very related to fatigue, and to help to relax the body. So grounding is very useful. That was where I started. On my own, I realized I needed to address this, and I started with noticing when I felt unsafe, noticing what it felt like, and then using that as the signal to start addressing that to help myself feel more safe by using my breath and by grounding. And I also often would just use self-soothing, because touch releases oxytocin and really helps to calm the body. And I'd put my hand on my heart and just say to my inner child, you're going to be okay. It's going to be all right. I know it's hard, but it's going to be all right. That's where you can start. And that alone is already an amazing place to start. It can make a big difference. And what the biggest thing I want to take you away from this, I would like you to take away from this, is that for me, my adrenal fatigue, my health crisis, was one of the biggest gifts I ever received. It is through my adrenal fatigue that I have come to the place where I am now, where I feel like I'm completely aligned to who I'm meant to be in this lifetime. I'm doing what fulfills me, it feeds me, it fulfills my passion. I am experiencing more joy in my life than I ever did. I have real, authentic relationships. I am able to hold my children's emotions, which I could never do. And I just feel so much more ease, and I feel like, oh my gosh, there are times when I get stressed, like I'm not going to lie, and there are times I get tired too. But I have the tools now so that I recognize when I'm in those places far faster, and I put something in place to stop it. So I feel so much more empowered. And it's not just me who's experienced my health crisis as a gift. My clients have as well. And I see it in all of them. And it's just so wonderful to witness how what can initially be seen as a terrible challenge can actually be an amazing opportunity and a gift. And I know this can be the case for you too. So I wish you all the best with this journey, and may your fatigue serve you well. All right, take care.